The scent of white lilies was suffocating, their sweetness clinging to the back of my throat like honey turned to ash. The funeral home was too warm, bodies pressed together in black mourning clothes, their whispers forming a hum that threatened to drown me. I stood in the corner, my blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun that gave me a headache, watching as they paid their respects to my uncle. The last family I had in this world, poor Eleanor, they murmured, when they thought I couldn't hear. All alone now. Rain pattered against the high windows, matching the rhythm of my heart. I clutched the silver pendant my mother had given me before she died, a crescent moon cradling a tiny star. When you feel lost, she told me, remember that even the smallest light can guide you through darkness. The metal was warm against my palm, the only heat that felt welcome against my skin. I hadn't cried. Not when I found Uncle James slumped in his favorite chair, not when the paramedics took him away, and not now as the funeral director gave his practice speech about a man he'd never met. Perhaps I was broken inside. Perhaps I'd used up all my tears when my parents died 3 years ago. Or perhaps some instinct told me to keep my vulnerability hidden, especially today. Because they were here. The pack. Standing apart from the human mourners, a group of 5 men and 3 women occupied the back of the room, their presence commanding space without effort. Even those who didn't know what they were gave them a wide berth, sensing something predatory beneath their expensive clothes and solemn expressions. Werewolves. Not that anyone in this small town would say the word aloud. We pretended they were just another founding family with old money and older secrets. The Blackridge pack controlled everything from the lumber mill that employed half the town to the very ground the funeral home stood upon. Uncle James had been their accountant, the only human they trusted with their considerable finances. And now he was gone. A movement caught my eye, someone entering late. The whispering stopped, the silence immediate and total. Even the funeral director's practiced speech faltered. He didn't wear black. His suit was charcoal gray, immaculately tailored to broad shoulders and a frame that seemed carved from something stronger than mere flesh. Dark hair swept back from a face too harsh to be called handsome, too compelling to look away from. His eyes, when they found mine across the room, were the gold of autumn leaves in sunlight. Inhuman. Dominic Stone. Alpha King of the Blackridge pack. The most dangerous creature within 100 miles. I'd never seen him this close before. He moved through the crowd, which parted without hesitation, his gaze never leaving mine. The pendant in my palm grew hot, almost burning against my skin. Miss Hayes. His voice was deep, roughened at the edges. He stopped before me, close enough that I could catch his scent. Pine and wood smoke and something wild beneath. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Mr. Stone, my condolences for your loss. The words were formal, but something in his expression wasn't. He studied me as though I were a puzzle with missing pieces. Your uncle was valuable to us. The way he said valuable, like my uncle had been a possession, a tool. I felt a flare of anger cut through my numbness. Thank you for coming, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Uncle James always spoke highly of his work with your family. A slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. And you? Did he speak of you often? I don't see how that matters now. His head tilted slightly, a curiously animal gesture. Everything matters, Miss Hayes, especially now. Before I could respond, one of his pack approached, a woman with sleek dark hair and cold eyes. She whispered something in his ear that made his expression harden. He nodded once, then returned his attention to me. We need to speak privately, he said. Not a request, but a command. After the service. My heart stuttered. About what? About your future, he glanced at the coffin, and a debt that remains unpaid. The woman beside him, his beta, I assumed, looked at me with open disdain. She doesn't know, she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear, clearly. Dominic's gaze swept over me again, lingering on my face, my throat, my hands still clutching my mother's pendant. We'll explain everything, tonight. He moved away, joining the rest of his pack, leaving me trembling in his wake. The service resumed, but but I barely heard the words. What debt? Uncle James had never mentioned owing anything to the wolves. He'd been careful, methodical in all things. It was why they'd trusted him with their money in the first place. After the final prayers were spoken and the other mourners began to disperse, I found myself surrounded by the pack. Not threateningly, they maintained a careful distance, but with clear purpose. No one else seemed to notice, or if they did, they quickly looked away. My car is outside, Dominic said, appearing at my side. We'll talk at my house. I have my own car, I replied, clutching my small purse. And I need to go home first. His jaw tightened. This isn't optional, Miss Hayes. Eleanor, I corrected automatically. And everything is optional, Mr. Stone. Something dangerous flickered in those golden eyes. Not this. Not when it comes to pack law. Pack law. The word sent a chill down my spine. I'd heard rumors, of course, everyone in town had, about their ancient codes and brutal justice. But what did that have to do with me? The woman from before, the beta, stepped forward. Dominic, we don't have time for this. Just bring her. He shot her a look that made her step back, head slightly bowed. Diana, wait in the car. She obeyed instantly, though the resentment in her eyes when she glanced at me was unmistakable. Please, Dominic said, the word sounding unused on his tongue. This concerns your safety as well. Something in his tone, a hint of genuine concern beneath the command, made me hesitate. I looked around at the now empty funeral home. What choice did I really have? They could easily force me if they wanted to. The fact that he was at least pretending to give me a choice seemed significant. Fine, I said, but I follow you in my car, and I want your word that I can leave whenever I choose. A muscle in his jaw jumped. You have my word that no harm will come to you under my roof. Not exactly what I'd asked for, but probably the best I'd get. I nodded once and followed him outside, the rain having turned to a fine mist that beaded on my black coat like tiny pearls. His house, or rather his estate, was north of town, a sprawling property surrounded by dense forest. I'd only seen it from a distance before. A grand stone mansion set against the mountain that gave the Blackridge Pack its name. As I followed his sleek black SUV through wrought iron gates, I gripped my steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. What was I doing? Following a pack of werewolves to their den because of some cryptic talk of debts and pack law? Uncle James would have called me reckless. But then again, Uncle James had apparently kept secrets from me, secrets that now, it seemed, had become my inheritance. The driveway curved through ancient oaks before opening to a circular drive before the house. It was even more imposing up close. 3 stories of gray stone with tall windows that glowed with warm light against the gathering dusk. Dominic waited for me on the steps. The rest of his pack already disappeared inside. As I approached, he studied me with that same puzzling intensity. You're afraid, he stated. But you're hiding it well. I'm not hiding anything, I replied, my mother's pendant a comfortable weight against my collarbone where I'd returned it. I just don't see the point in showing fear to predators. His lips curved slightly. Smart girl. Woman, I corrected. I'm 26, not a child. Indeed. He held the massive front door open. After you, Miss Hayes. The interior was surprisingly warm, not just in temperature but in design. Rich woods, deep jewel-toned fabrics, and the golden glow of countless lamps created an atmosphere more welcoming than I'd expected. The scent of pine was stronger here, mingled with leather and something herbal I couldn't identify. Dominic led me to a study lined with books. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and leather chairs were arranged in a conversation circle before it. The rest of the pack was notably absent. Would you like something to drink? He asked, moving to a sideboard where crystal decanters caught the firelight. No. I remained standing near the door. I'd like an explanation. He poured himself a glass of amber liquid, his movements deliberate and controlled. When he turned back to me, his expression was grave. Your uncle owed us a life debt, he said. And by pack law, it transfers to you. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. A life debt? That can't be real. I assure you, it's very real. He gestured to one of the chairs. Please sit, Eleanor. This will take some explanation. I perched on the edge of the chair, my body tense. Explain then. Dominic sat across from me, the firelight casting shadows across the planes of his face. 3 years ago, your uncle made a mistake, a significant error in our financial records that could have exposed certain investments to human authorities. Uncle James would never. It wasn't intentional, he cut in. But it was careless, the kind of carelessness that would normally cost a human their life. My blood ran cold. You would have killed him over a mistake? Pack law is absolute. His voice was matter-of-fact. Our survival depends on secrecy, on absolute loyalty from those few humans we trust with our business. But you didn't kill him, I pointed out, my mind racing. No. Dominic took a sip of his drink, because he offered an alternative. A cure. A cure? For what? For me. His golden eyes held mine. I was unwell. A condition unique to alphas who rise to power too young, who take too much power too quickly. He set his glass down. Your uncle offered you. The words made no sense at first. Offered me? He knew what you were, even if you don't. Dominic leaned forward. You're an omega, Eleanor, extremely rare among humans. Your energy, your essence, it balances the alpha nature, stabilizes it. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. That's insane. You're saying my uncle offered me to you? Like some kind of sacrifice? Not a sacrifice. Dominic remained seated, though his gaze tracked my movements. A healer. He promised that when the time came, when my condition worsened, you would help. In exchange, I spared his life and kept him in his position. And now you're what? Collecting? I backed toward the door. I never agreed to this. Whatever arrangement you had with my uncle died with him. Dominic rose in one fluid motion. Unfortunately, pack law doesn't work that way. The debt transfers to next of kin. And my condition has deteriorated since your uncle's death. For the first time, I noticed the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his powerful frame. Was he truly ill in some way, or was this an elaborate lie to what? What could he possibly want from me? What exactly would this cure entail? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Something shifted in his gaze, a hunger that hadn't been there before, or perhaps had been carefully controlled until now. A taste, he said softly. Just a taste of your energy. Omegas can transfer their healing power through blood, through touch, through... He stopped, then continued more carefully. The method varies. Blood? I repeated incredulously. You want to drink my blood? It would be the simplest method, yes. He spoke as if discussing the weather, not vampirism. This is crazy, I said, reaching for the door handle. I'm leaving. Before my hand touched the brass, he was there, not touching me but blocking my exit. I hadn't even seen him move. You gave your word, I reminded him, my heart pounding. That no harm would come to you under my roof, he agreed, and none will. But I cannot let you leave, Eleanor. Not until you understand what's at stake, not just for me, but for you. What do you mean for me? His expression darkened. There are others who know what you are, who've known since your uncle first revealed it. If I don't claim you under pack protection, they will come for you, and they won't ask nicely. The genuine concern in his voice made my stomach twist. Claim me? I'm not a possession. In this world, my world, which is now unfortunately yours, everyone belongs to someone, Dominic said. Humans don't survive long in wolf business without protection. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the mist had turned back to rain, drumming against the windows. I was trapped, if not by this man, then by circumstances I'd never asked for and barely understood. One taste, I said finally. And then what? Something flashed in his eyes, triumph, relief, something darker I couldn't name. Then we negotiate the terms of your protection. You'll be compensated, of course, generously. Like a transaction? The idea was almost more offensive than the original demand. Like an arrangement, he corrected. Between equals. I laughed bitterly. We're not equals. You made that very clear. Perhaps not in power, he conceded. But in need? In this moment. His gaze intensified. I need you, Eleanor Hayes. Perhaps more than anyone has ever needed you before. The word sent an unexpected shiver through me. Not entirely from fear. I took a deep breath, my hand moving unconsciously to my mother's pendant. Even the smallest light can guide you through darkness, I whispered to myself. Dominic's head tilted. What was that? I met his gaze squarely. If I agree to this one taste, I
Right
want
now,
something in return.
not later.
Interest sparked in his eyes. Name it. The truth, I said. All of it. About what I am. About what my uncle did. About what happens after tonight. No more secrets. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as though seeing something new. Then he inclined his head in a gesture that seemed almost like respect. Done, he said. But first, he held out his hand, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. May I? I stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that whatever I decided in this moment would change everything. Then, with a courage I didn't know I possessed, I placed my hand in his. His skin was burning hot, his fingers closing around mine with careful restraint. The contact sent a jolt through me, like static electricity but deeper, reaching places inside me I hadn't known existed. His pupils dilated, golden irises nearly swallowed by black. Omega, he breathed, the words sounding like reverence and hunger combined. And I knew, with sudden certainty, that whatever happened next, Dominic Stone would never let me go. When Dominic's hand closed around mine, something electric passed between us, a current of energy that made my skin prickle and my breath catch. His pupils dilated until only a thin ring of gold remained, and I watched in fascination and terror as his breathing changed, becoming deeper, almost ragged. What's happening? I whispered, unable to pull away despite my instinct to flee. Your energy, he said, his voice rougher than before. I can feel it already, like cool water on a burn. His other hand came up slowly, telegraphing his movement as if approaching a frightened animal. Fingers brushed my cheek, so gently it might have been a breeze, and the sensation intensified. That strange electrical current flowing between us, from me to him. I could almost see it, a pale blue glow where our skin connected. This isn't possible, I murmured, even as my body hummed with unfamiliar power. It's what you were born for, Dominic said, his eyes half closed as if in ecstasy. To balance, to heal. Something in his words sparked anger through my wonder. I jerked my hand away, breaking the connection. I wasn't born to be anyone's cure. I'm not a remedy to be bottled and consumed. Dominic's eyes snapped fully open, his expression momentarily dangerous before he mastered it. Poor choice of words, he conceded. But the fact remains, you have a gift, Eleanor, one that could save lives, mine for starters. You said a taste, I reminded him, putting distance between us. That seemed like more than a taste. He smiled faintly. That was merely an appetizer. A true healing requires more intimate contact. Heat rushed to my face. Define intimate. Blood is the most direct conduit, he said, watching me carefully. A small amount would suffice for now. For now, I repeated, and later? Later we discuss arrangements for your continued protection and assistance. He moved to the sideboard, retrieving his abandoned drink. But you wanted the truth first. What specifically do you wish to know? I gathered my scattered thoughts, trying to focus on what mattered most. How did my uncle know what I was? How did you know? Dominic gestured for me to sit again, which I did, perching on the edge of the chair. He took his time answering, as if choosing his words carefully. Your uncle didn't know at first, none of us did. But 7 years ago, there was an incident. He rolled the crystal glass between his palms. A young wolf in my pack was injured, badly. You would have been 19, visiting your uncle for the summer before college. Memory stirred. A rainy night. A wounded man on Uncle James's doorstep. The hiker, I said slowly. The one who'd been attacked by a wild animal. Wild animal, Dominic repeated with a mirthless smile. Yes, that's what James told you. In truth, it was a rival pack that had crossed into our territory. Ryan had been on patrol alone. I helped Uncle James clean his wounds, I recalled. They were deep. Should have needed a hospital, but Uncle insisted he'd be fine with first aid. because the wounds had been made by werewolf claws, I now realized. Wounds that would have revealed the victim's true nature to human doctors. Ryan was unconscious when you arrived, Dominic continued. Near death, in fact. James was calling me, preparing me for the loss of one of my wolves. Then you touched him. The memory crystallized, placing my hand on the stranger's feverish brow, feeling a strange pulling sensation, a dizziness that Uncle James had later attributed to the sight of so much blood. He healed, I said softly, too quickly. By morning, the wounds were just pink scars. Dominic nodded. James realized what had happened, what you had done, unknowingly. He researched our histories, our ancient texts. Omegas were thought to be extinct among humans. The bloodlines had been hunted nearly to extinction in medieval times, when your kind was burned as witches for their healing abilities. My kind, I echoed. The concept felt simultaneously alien and familiar, like a language I'd heard in childhood but never learned to speak. Omega energy is complementary to alpha power, Dominic explained. We are opposites on the spectrum. I am fire, you are water. I destroy, you create. I command, you... He paused. Submit? I suggested with an edge to my voice. His eyes flashed. Balance, he corrected. Without fire, there is no warmth. Without water, all burns to ash. Neither is subservient to the other. They are necessary counterparts. It sounded rehearsed, like something from those ancient texts he'd mentioned. I wondered how much he truly believed it. And my uncle offered me to you when you needed balancing, I said. Without my knowledge or consent, guilt flickered across his features, quickly masked. He promised your assistance when the time came. I assumed he would prepare you. Well, he didn't, I said bitterly. He never said a word about any of this, not about werewolves or omegas or life debts. He let me believe the world was normal. He was protecting you, Dominic said, surprising me with the gentleness in his tone. Knowledge of our world is dangerous. Once you enter it, there's no going back. I didn't ask to enter it. Few of us choose our destinies, Eleanor. He set down his glass. I certainly didn't choose mine. Something in his voice, a weariness, a resignation, made me look at him more closely. Beyond the intimidating exterior, the power that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. I saw exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, the set of his shoulders. What's wrong with you? I asked, more softly than I'd intended. You said you're unwell. What does that mean for an alpha? He was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. Alphas channel power for their entire pack, he finally said. We hold it, control it, direct it. When the balance is right, this is sustainable. But when an alpha takes power too young, or gains too much too quickly, he flexed his hand, and I noticed fine tremors in his fingers. The power begins to burn from within. Like a wire carrying too much current, eventually it melts. You're burning out, I realized. Literally? It begins with tremors, headaches, insomnia, progresses to rage episodes, inability to shift properly. The final stages are unpleasant. Madness, in essence. The power consumes the mind before it destroys the body. His eyes met mine. Only 3 cases have been documented in our history. None of those alphas survived. A chill went through me. And you think I can heal this condition? I know you can. Temporarily, at least. He leaned forward. When Ryan touched you 7 years ago, your energy flowed into him instinctively. But an Omega can also direct their energy consciously, with practice. Channel it where it's most needed. I don't know how to do that, I said, anxiety fluttering in my chest. I don't even fully believe all this yet. You will, he assured me. Your body remembers what your mind doesn't yet comprehend. Before I could respond, the study door opened. Diana, the beta who had looked at me with such disdain at the funeral, entered without knocking. Her gaze flicked between us, lingering on our proximity with obvious disapproval. The council members are getting restless, she told Dominic. They want to know if she's agreed. The council? I asked. Pack elders. Dominic explained, not taking his eyes off Diana. Tell them we'll join them shortly. Diana didn't move. They're concerned about her cooperation, given her lack of preparation. The last words were directed at me, a subtle accusation. My cooperation is my own to give or withhold, I said, standing to face her. And it's not guaranteed by intimidation. Diana's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. She turned to Dominic. You haven't told her everything. Something passed between them, a silent communication that excluded me. Dominic's jaw tightened. Leave us, Diana, he commanded, his voice layered with a power that made the air vibrate. She flinched visibly, her eyes lowering. As you wish, Alpha, she backed out, closing the door with more force than necessary. What haven't you told me? I demanded once she was gone. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Diana believes I should have explained the full implications of an Omega's role in pack hierarchy. Unease crept up my spine. Which are? He hesitated, which scared me more than anything else had so far. Dominic Stone didn't seem like a man who hesitated often. An Omega who heals an Alpha creates a bond, he finally said. A permanent one. The more healing performed, the stronger the bond becomes. Eventually it can't be broken except by death. The room suddenly felt too warm, too small. A bond? Like marriage? More fundamental than marriage, he said. More like becoming two halves of the same entity. You would feel my emotions, I would feel yours. Your pain would be my pain. My strength, your strength. I shook my head, backing away. No, absolutely not. You said a taste. One taste, for information. Nothing about eternal magical bonds. For today, yes, he agreed. One taste. But you needed to know the truth about what continued healing would mean. The Council hopes, that you'll agree to more. Why would I ever agree to that? I asked incredulously. To be mystically shackled to a stranger for life? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Because the alternative might be worse. What's that supposed to mean? It means there are others who would claim an Omega without the courtesy of asking first, he said bluntly. Packs from the South who follow older, crueler traditions. Packs who learned of your existence when your uncle sought information about what you were. Fear, cold and sharp, slid down my spine. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, Dominic corrected. My protection comes with conditions, yes. But I would never force a bond, others would. Others already move against us, sensing my weakness, waiting for me to fall so they can claim my territory. His expression hardened, and anything else of value within it. Including me, he didn't need to say. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly chilled despite the fire. So those are my options? Bond with you or be taken by someone worse? Those are the immediate options, he said carefully. Given time and my continued protection, we could perhaps find alternatives. Other packs with more progressive views, perhaps. But time is what I lack most at present. I felt dizzy with the weight of revelations, with choices I'd never imagined having to make. My fingers found my mother's pendant again, its familiar shape anchoring me. The Council, I said. I want to meet them. To hear other perspectives before I agree to anything beyond today. Surprise flickered across his face. They're not known for their patience or diplomacy. Nevertheless, I insisted, if I'm being forced into your world, I want to understand its politics, its players. He studied me with new interest, as if I'd done something unexpected. Very well, he finally agreed. But first, our original arrangement. I need that taste of healing, Eleanor. Even to face the Council, I need clarity. The tremor in his hands had worsened while we talked. Looking closer, I could see a faint sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cool air. He was in pain, I realized, fighting it, masking it, but suffering nonetheless. Something twisted in my chest. Pity, perhaps, or some deeper instinct I didn't yet understand. Whatever it was, it moved me forward until I stood directly before him. What do I need to do? I asked quietly. Relief softened his features for an instant before he controlled his expression. Your wrist would be simplest. Just a small wound, enough for a few drops. My heart hammered as I extended my arm, wrist upturned. Dominic took my hand with surprising gentleness, his touch sending that same electric current through me. "Are you sure?" he asked, searching my face. I nodded, not trusting my voice. From his pocket, he withdrew a small silver knife, its handle inscribed with symbols I didn't recognize. The blade glinted in the firelight as he brought it to my skin. "Breathe," he instructed, his eyes holding mine. "And think of healing, of balance." The blade was so sharp I barely felt it slice across my wrist. Just the faintest sting, and then warmth as blood welled in a thin line. Dominic's pupils dilated again as he brought my wrist to his mouth, his breath hot against my skin for one suspended moment before his lips pressed to the wound. The sensation was indescribable. Not pain, though not quite pleasure either, a pulling, a connection, as if a circuit had been completed. Energy flowed from some deep well inside me, through my blood into him. I gasped, my knees weakening, and his arm came around my waist to steady me, drawing me closer as he drank. Images flashed through my mind. A forest at night, running on 4 legs through moonlight, the taste of freedom and power. His memories, I realized with shock. I was seeing through his eyes, feeling what he felt. Then came darker images, pain like fire in his veins, rage that threatened to consume, the terror of losing control and harming those he protected, the crushing weight of responsibility, of knowing an entire community's safety rested on his strength alone. "Enough," I whispered, overwhelmed by the intimacy of it, the invasion of his experiences into my mind. Instantly, he released my wrist, though his arm remained around me. When he raised his head, his eyes were clearer, the gold brighter. The lines of pain had eased from his face, and the tremors in his hands had stilled. "Eleanor," he breathed, my name sounding like a prayer on his lips. A drop of my blood stained the corner of his mouth. Without thinking, I reached up and wiped it away with my thumb. The touch sent another spark between us, and his hand captured mine, holding it against his cheek. "What did you see?" he asked softly. "You," I answered simply. "Your memories, your pain." Something vulnerable passed through his eyes. "And now you understand why I need you." "I understand why you're afraid," I corrected gently. "Why you're desperate." He released me slowly, as if reluctant to break contact. Taking a handkerchief from his pocket, he carefully wrapped it around my wrist, covering the already closing wound. "The council will be waiting," he said, his voice steadier than before. "Are you ready?" I wasn't ready, not for any of this, but I nodded anyway, squaring my shoulders. "Lead the way." As we left the study, I caught my reflection in a mirror hanging in the hallway. I looked the same, blonde hair now escaping its severe bun, pale face flushed with color, but something in my eyes had changed, as if I'd seen beyond a veil I hadn't known existed. The world had shifted, reality itself reshaped around me, and though fear still twisted in my stomach, something else stirred alongside it, a curiosity, a strange exhilaration. For the first time in years, since losing my parents and sinking into the comfortable numbness of routine, I felt fully awake. Dominic Stone had taken my blood, glimpsed my power, and awakened something dormant within me. The question now was what I would do with that awakening, and whether I could maintain my freedom in a world where I had suddenly become the most valuable prize. The council chamber was not what I expected. Instead of some formal meeting room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs, Dominic led me to what appeared to be a converted solarium at the rear of the mansion. Glass walls and ceiling revealed the night sky, rain still pattering against the panes. Plush sofas and armchairs were arranged in a loose circle around a central hearth where a fire blazed. Potted plants, ferns, small trees, and flowering vines created a sense of being in a cultivated wilderness. 6 people waited for us, 4 men and 2 women, including Diana. They ranged in age from perhaps 30 to well over 70, though I knew appearances could be deceptive with werewolves. According to town rumors, some lived for centuries. Dominic's hand rested lightly at the small of my back as we entered, a gesture that felt simultaneously protective and possessive. The council members rose as one when we appeared, their attention fixing on me with an intensity that made me fight the urge to step behind Dominic. "Council members," Dominic said, his voice carrying that subtle resonance of power I'd noticed before. "May I present Eleanor Hayes, the oldest among them, a white-haired man with startlingly blue eyes and the erect posture of a former military officer, stepped forward first. "Miss Hayes," he said, inclining his head slightly. "I am Victor Reynolds, Beta Emeritus of the Black Ridge Pack. We've waited a long time to meet you." "Apparently longer than necessary," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice, "since no one bothered to inform me of my situation until today." Diana made a small sound of disapproval, but Victor's weathered face creased in a smile. "She has spirit," he remarked to Dominic. "Good. An Omega needs strength of character as well as power." "Eleanor has agreed to nothing beyond providing temporary relief," Dominic said, emphasizing the last word with a warning glance at the council. "She's here to understand our world before making any decisions." A younger man with russet hair and a neatly trimmed beard snorted softly. "Decisions? Pack law is clear on the matter of life debts." "Oliver," Dominic growled, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "I'm merely stating facts," Oliver continued, unperturbed. "Her uncle pledged her service, the debt transfers. I am not property to be transferred," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "and I'd appreciate being addressed directly rather than discussed as if I weren't present." Oliver's eyebrows rose, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement. "My apologies, Miss Hayes, but surely you understand our urgency. Our Alpha is unwell. You have the power to heal him. The path forward seems straightforward." "Nothing about this situation is straightforward," I countered. "I've just learned that werewolves exist, that I'm something called an Omega, and that my uncle essentially sold me without my knowledge. Forgive me if I'm not rushing to fulfill his bargain." A woman with silver-streaked black hair and elegant features leaned forward. "Child, no one expects blind obedience, but you must understand the stakes. Dominic's condition affects the entire pack. Without a strong alpha, we are vulnerable to outside threats. And you," she paused delicately, "you would be particularly vulnerable." "So I've been told," I said. Repeatedly. It's starting to sound less like concern for my welfare and more like a threat. Tension crackled through the room. Dominic shifted slightly, positioning himself more directly between me and the council. "Eleanor has already provided initial healing," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She deserves time to process what she's learned, and I will not have her intimidated." Victor studied us both, his gaze shrewd. "You've tasted her," he stated rather than asked. "How do you feel?" Dominic's posture relaxed fractionally. Clearer, stronger. The tremors have subsided. For how long, though? This from Diana, who had been watching me with barely concealed hostility. "A temporary fix only delays the inevitable. A temporary fix buys time," Dominic countered. "Time we need." "Time for what?" I asked, drawing their attention back to me. "To convince me to form this bond you mentioned? Or to find an alternative solution?" Victor exchanged glances with the silver-haired woman. "There is no alternative solution, Miss Hayes. An alpha in decline needs an omega bond. Without it, Dominic will deteriorate until he can no longer lead. Then the succession fight begins." His expression grew somber. "Many will die, both wolves and humans caught in the crossfire. And whoever emerges as the new alpha will claim you anyway." The bluntness of his words struck me like a physical blow. "So, I have no real choice." "There is always choice," Dominic said softly, "but rarely without consequence." I turned to face him fully, searching his golden eyes for any sign of deception. "If I agreed to help you, to form this bond, what would my life look like? Would I be a prisoner here? What? Mystical battery you draw from when needed?" Something like pain flashed across his features. "No. You would be my partner, my equal in all things." "Pretty words," I said. "But what do they mean in practice? Would I still have my own home, my own job, my own life?" "You could maintain your independence to a degree," he answered carefully. "But the bond requires proximity. Separation becomes difficult over time and distance." And if I wanted to leave completely, to break this bond once formed, the silence that followed was answer enough. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the fire. I need air, I said, moving toward the glass doors that led to a covered terrace. Eleanor, Dominic began. Alone, I added firmly. Just give me 5 minutes to think. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. The terrace is secure. Take all the time you need. The cool night air was a relief against my flushed skin. Rain drummed on the terrace roof, creating a curtain of water around the edges that isolated me from the surrounding forest. I leaned against the stone balustrade, breathing deeply, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Inside, I could see them through the glass. Dominic standing with his back to me, facing the council, his posture rigid. They appeared to be arguing, though I couldn't hear the words. Diana gesticulated angrily while Victor spoke with clear authority. Dominic shook his head repeatedly, one hand clenching into a fist at his side. They were arguing about me, I realized. About my future, which apparently now contained only 2 paths. Bond with Dominic, or be claimed by some unknown, supposedly worse alpha when Dominic inevitably fell. My fingers found my mother's pendant, its familiar shape a small comfort. What would she advise if she were here? She had always valued freedom, independence. Make your own choices, Ellie, she'd say. Don't let others decide your path. But what choice did I really have, if what they said was true, and my experience with Dominic's healing had convinced me more than any words could? Then refusing the bond meant condemning Dominic to a painful decline and death. It meant chaos for the pack, violence that would spill into my town, and eventually my own capture by forces that wouldn't bother asking nicely. A gilded cage with Dominic, or an iron one with someone else. Some choice. Movement in the forest caught my eye, a shadow detaching from the deeper darkness between the trees. I stiffened, peering through the rain. Was that a figure standing at the edge of the clearing? I blinked, and whatever I'd seen was gone, if it had ever been there at all. Just nerves, I told myself. Imagination fueled by an impossible day. The door behind me opened. I expected Dominic, but it was Victor who joined me on the terrace, closing the door firmly against eavesdroppers. They'll be arguing for a while, he said, coming to stand beside me. Dominic insists you must have true choice. Diana believes pack safety supersedes individual rights, an old debate among our kind. I studied his weathered face. And where do you stand? After 3 centuries, I've learned that force bonds rarely end well, he said. At my startled expression, he smiled faintly. Yes, I'm older than I look. You get used to the math eventually. 300 years, I murmured. You must have seen so much change, more than you can imagine, he agreed. But also surprising constants in human and werewolf nature. The desire for freedom, the fear of loss, the desperate measures we take when threatened. He turned to face me directly. Dominic is a good alpha, the best I've seen in my lifetime. He cares more for his people, wolf and human alike, than for power itself. That's rare. You're trying to convince me to help him, I observed. I'm trying to help you see the full picture, Victor corrected. Dominic won't tell you how bad his condition truly is. His pride won't allow it. But I watched the previous alpha of this pack descend into madness from the same affliction. It was... He shuddered. Horrific. By the end, he attacked his own family, killed his mate and 2 of his children before we could stop him. My God, I whispered. And that's Dominic's fate without an Omega? Victor nodded grimly. The beast takes over when the man can no longer control it. The power that makes an alpha strong becomes poison without the proper balance. Balance, I repeated. That word keeps coming up, as if I'm just the other half of an equation, the yin to his yang. I shook my head. But I'm a person, Victor, with dreams and plans that never included becoming magically bonded to a werewolf alpha. What were those dreams? He asked gently. The question caught me off guard. No one else had bothered to ask. I'm a librarian, I said. I've been saving to go back to school for my master's in library science. I want to renovate the town's historic library building, expand its programs, create a place where knowledge and community can flourish. Victor smiled, the expression warming his severe features. Noble aspirations, and not incompatible with being bonded to the Alpha, you know. Our pack owns that building. Dominic could ensure your vision becomes reality. As a consolation prize for my freedom? I asked sharply. As recognition of your value beyond being an Omega, he countered. Dominic respects intelligence, education. He was a professor once, before he was called home to lead. This surprised me. A professor? Of what? History and anthropology, specializing in ancient cultural practices. Rather fitting, given what he became. Victor's gaze turned distant. He was happy in that life. The academic suited him better than the warrior, though he excels at both. I tried to reconcile the intimidating Alpha with the image of a university professor. It wasn't as difficult as I expected. There was an intelligence in Dominic's eyes, a thoughtfulness beneath the power that made sense now. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you see him only as the Alpha who demands your sacrifice, Victor said. I want you to understand he's also a man who has already sacrificed much for duty, who would give you as much freedom as the bond allows, who would value your mind as well as your Omega nature. Before I could respond, the terrace door opened again. Dominic stood there, his powerful frame silhouetted against the warm light from inside. Victor, he said, his voice carefully neutral. The council has reached a decision. Victor straightened, suddenly formal. And what has our Alpha decided? Dominic's eyes found mine. That Eleanor will have 1 month to consider her position. During that time, she will stay at the pack house for protection and education about our ways. She will provide temporary healing as needed, without forming a permanent bond, until she makes her choice. And if I refuse these terms? I asked, already knowing the answer. Then the council will invoke pack law regarding life debts, Dominic said, regret evident in his tone, and the choice will be removed from both of us. Victor sighed heavily. It's more generous than many would offer, Miss Hayes. I suggest you accept. A month, 4 weeks to decide the entire course of my future. It wasn't enough time. How could it be? But it was more than I'd expected when the day began with my uncle's funeral. I have conditions, I said, straightening my spine. I want to continue working at the library. I want access to any books or records you have about Omegas. And I want your word that during this month, no one will pressure me or attempt to influence my decision. Dominic's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Granted, with one caveat, you'll need a pack escort when you leave the grounds, for your safety. Not Diana, I said immediately. A hint of amusement touched his lips. Agreed. Ryan would be suitable, I think. You've met before, after all. The wounded hiker from years ago. Somehow it felt fitting. Fine, I said. 1 month. No bond unless I choose it freely. You have my word, Dominic said with formal gravity, then more softly. Thank you, Eleanor. Victor clapped his hands together once. Excellent. I'll inform the council. He paused at the door. Dominic, perhaps you should show Eleanor to her rooms. It's been a long day, and she looks exhausted. Only when he mentioned it did I realize how bone-tired I was. The emotional whiplash of the day, from funeral to supernatural revelations to blood ritual, had drained me completely. Of course, Dominic agreed. If you'll follow me, Eleanor, Victor departed, leaving us alone on the rain-enclosed terrace. Dominic made no move to approach me, giving me space I hadn't expected. Thank you, I said after a moment. For arguing for my choice. It should never have been in question, he replied, a flash of anger crossing his features. Diana and Oliver believe the old ways are best, that pack survival justifies any means. He shook his head. I've seen where that path leads. To madness? Like the previous Alpha? Pain flickered in his eyes. He was my father. The simple statement hung between us, heavy with unspoken grief. I'm sorry, I said softly. Dominic nodded once, accepting my sympathy without comment. Your rooms are in the East Wing. I had them prepared when I learned of your uncle's passing. The implication that he'd been expecting, planning for this moment, sent a chill through me. My apartment. We'll send someone for your personal belongings tomorrow, he said. Make a list of what you need. It was happening so fast. This morning, I'd been Eleanor Hayes, orphaned librarian, laying her uncle to rest. Tonight, I was an Omega, a mystical healer held in a werewolf mansion, with my future narrowed to impossible choices. One step at a time, Dominic said, as if reading my thoughts. Tonight, rest. Tomorrow we begin your education about our world. He led me back through the solarium, where the council members had dispersed except for Diana, who watched us with thinly veiled resentment. Through corridors lined with artwork that spanned centuries, up a grand staircase of polished wood, to a wing where soft lighting and plush carpets created an atmosphere of comfort and luxury. "These will be your rooms," Dominic said, opening double doors to reveal a suite that took my breath away, a sitting room with a fireplace already lit, bookshelves filled with volumes both old and new, comfortable furniture in shades of blue and silver. Beyond, I glimpsed a bedroom, with a massive four-poster bed, and what appeared to be a marble bathroom beyond that. "It's not what I expected," I admitted, stepping inside. "What did you expect? A cell?" There was no mockery in his tone, only genuine curiosity. Something less comfortable, less welcoming. I ran my fingers over the spines of the books nearest me, classics mixed with contemporary fiction, several volumes on local history. "You're not a prisoner, Eleanor," he said quietly. "You're an honored guest, even if the circumstances are less than ideal." I turned to face him, suddenly aware of our isolation, of the intimacy of being alone with him in what were now, apparently, my private quarters. "What happens now? With your condition? You said the healing was temporary." Dominic remained in the doorway, not entering further without invitation. "It will hold for a few days. After that, I'll need another taste." The word sent a shiver through me, memory of his mouth on my wrist still viscerally present. "And that will be enough? No pressure for more?" "No pressure," he confirmed, "though the council will watch closely for any sign of deterioration. They fear for the pack's future. And you? What do you fear?" The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it seriously before answering. "I fear becoming what my father became, losing control, harming those I'm sworn to protect." His golden eyes held mine. "I fear taking your freedom to save myself." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep within me. "Yet you must consider it. Otherwise we wouldn't be here." "I consider many things I hope never to do," he said softly. "The weight of leadership is choosing the least terrible option when all choices bring harm." We stood in silence for a moment, the rain outside providing gentle background music to this strange, intense conversation. "You should rest," Dominic finally said, breaking the tension. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges." "More supernatural revelations?" I asked, attempting lightness I didn't feel. The corner of his mouth curved slightly, perhaps. "But also practical matters. Clothes, belongings, work arrangements. Making this situation as normal as possible under the circumstances. Normal." The word seemed absurd given everything that had happened. Yet I found myself nodding, craving some semblance of routine amid the chaos. "Good night, Eleanor," Dominic said, beginning to close the doors. "Wait," I called, surprising myself. "Your father, the previous Alpha. What was his name?" Dominic paused, something vulnerable passing through his expression. "William," he said quietly. "His name was William Stone." With that, he closed the doors, leaving me alone in my beautiful new cage. I heard no lock turn, no key scrape in the mechanism. I was free to leave, in theory. But where would I go? Who would protect me from the dangers Dominic and the council had described? I moved to the windows, drawing back heavy curtains to reveal the rain-soaked night beyond. Somewhere in that darkness were threats I couldn't see or understand. Somewhere, too, was my old life, my modest apartment, my books, my carefully planned future that now seemed like a child's drawing, simple and unreal compared to the complex painting my life had become. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, familiar, yet somehow changed. The woman who had stood at her uncle's funeral this morning was gone, transformed by blood and revelation. For better or worse, Eleanor Hayes the Omega had emerged from the chrysalis of ignorance. And in the morning, I would begin to discover what that truly meant. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, momentarily disoriented by the luxurious surroundings. The events of the previous day crashed back. The funeral, Dominic, blood, and bargains. I sat up, half expecting to find it had all been an elaborate dream, but the elegant bedroom confirmed my new reality. A soft knock came at the door. "Miss Hayes, are you awake?" A woman's voice, neither Diana's nor anyone I'd met yesterday. "Yes," I called, quickly pulling the covers higher. The door opened to reveal a young woman with copper hair and freckles, carrying a tray. "Good morning. I'm Mara, assigned to help you settle in." She placed the tray, laden with coffee, fruit, and pastries, on a nearby table. "Alpha Dominic asked me to bring breakfast and let you know Ryan will arrive at 9 to escort you to your apartment for belongings." I glanced at the ornate clock on the mantel. 8:30. "Thank you, Mara." She hovered uncertainly. "Is there anything else you need?" "Clothes have been placed in the closet. They might not be perfect fits, but they'll do until yours arrive." "Actually," I ventured, "I have questions. About the pack. About being an Omega. Dominic mentioned education, but I don't know where to start." Mara's expression brightened. "I can help with that. I'm studying pack histories, hoping to become a record keeper someday. I could bring some books, or if you prefer, just answer questions directly." Her enthusiasm was infectious, making me smile despite everything. "Both would be wonderful. I'll gather some materials while you're out with Ryan," she promised. "And I'm happy to answer anything now, though we only have half an hour before he arrives." I sipped the coffee, perfectly prepared with cream and a hint of cinnamon, somehow exactly how I liked it. "Let's start with the basics. What exactly is an Omega? Beyond the healing abilities, I mean." Mara sat at the edge of a nearby chair. Omegas are balance keepers. In werewolf packs, natural-born Omegas help smooth tensions, mediate conflicts, and heal both physical and emotional wounds. They're extremely rare. Most packs have none. "But I'm human," I pointed out. "Human Omegas are even rarer," she nodded. "They appear perhaps once in a generation worldwide. The gift runs in bloodlines but often skips many generations. It's believed all human Omegas descended from ancient healers who gained their powers through contact with supernatural beings." I thought of my mother's pendant, passed down through maternal generations. Could my mother have been one? Possibly. Or perhaps the gift was dormant in her. Sometimes it awakens through trauma or necessity. Mara tilted her head. "Did you experience any significant trauma before discovering your abilities?" "My parents' death in the car accident. Finding myself suddenly alone at 23, responsibility crushing down." "Yes," I said softly. "I did." Mara's expression grew sympathetic. "That fits the pattern. Your power likely awakened then, but remained untapped until needed, when you encountered the injured wolf." I took another sip of coffee, processing this. And this bond that would form with Dominic, what exactly does it involve? He mentioned feeling each other's emotions, sharing pain. "The Alpha-Omega bond is the strongest connection in our world," Mara explained. "It's a soul bond, linking your energies permanently. You'd share emotions, physical sensations to some degree, and develop an awareness of each other's locations. Distance becomes painful after a while. But there are benefits too: enhanced healing for both of you, increased longevity for you, and immunity to other wolves' compulsions." Compulsions. Alphas can influence emotions and behaviors of others, especially humans, like when Dominic speaks with that resonant voice that makes people instinctively obey. You'd be immune once bonded. I remembered how Diana had reacted when Dominic commanded her to leave. So I'd be trading freedom of movement for freedom from influence. Mara hesitated. "That's one way to look at it. Though most Omegas in history have described the bond as the deepest connection they've ever known. Many wrote that they felt incomplete before bonding, like part of themselves was missing. It sounded like supernatural Stockholm Syndrome to me." "And sexually? Is there an expectation that bonded pairs become intimate?" Mara blushed. "Traditionally, yes. The physical aspect strengthens the bond. But modern packs recognize consent and autonomy. Dominic would never force, no, I interrupted. But pressure? Expectation? Power imbalance? Her blush deepened. I shouldn't speak to the alpha's intentions. Another knock saved her from answering further. Ryan entered, a tall man with sandy hair and an open face that I vaguely recognized from that night 7 years ago. He smiled warmly. "Eleanor Hayes. It's good to properly meet the woman who saved my life." "I hardly did that," I demurred, though Dominic's explanation suggested otherwise. "You absolutely did." His expression grew serious. "I owe you everything, which is why I volunteered as your escort, to repay that debt however I can." I appreciated his directness. "By protecting me from these other packs Dominic mentioned?" "Exactly." Ryan's friendly demeanor hardened. "The Southern Crescent Alliance has been testing our borders since news of Dominic's condition spread. They follow older traditions regarding Omegas." "Meaning?" "Meaning they believe Omegas should be claimed, not courted." His bluntness was oddly refreshing after the careful diplomatic language the council had used. "I won't sugarcoat this. You're in danger outside these walls unless adequately protected." I thought of the shadow I'd glimpsed in the forest. Perhaps not imagination after all. "I need to understand everything," I said firmly. "No more sheltering or half-truths." Ryan nodded. "Dominic said you'd say that. He also said to tell you he's called ahead to the library. Explained you'd had a family emergency and would need 2 weeks leave." "2 weeks?" I protested. "But he said I could keep working after you've had basic training," Ryan interrupted gently, "including self-defense and recognition of supernatural threats. You can't safely return to normal life without those skills." It made sense, frustrating as it was. I sighed, finishing my coffee. "Let me get dressed then. I want to get my things and begin this education as soon as possible." 30 days isn't much time to decide my entire future. 20 minutes later, dressed in borrowed jeans and a sweater, I followed Ryan to a black SUV with tinted windows. 2 more vehicles, one ahead, one behind, joined our procession, making me feel simultaneously important and imprisoned. "Is this much security necessary just to visit my apartment?" I asked, as we drove through the massive iron gates. "After what happened last night, yes." Ryan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I frowned. "What happened last night?" He glanced at me sharply. "Dominic didn't tell you. We caught Southern Crescent scouts on our territory. They retreated before we could capture them, but their presence alone is a declaration of interest." "Interest in me?" He didn't need to add. I shivered despite the car's warmth. "That's why Dominic agreed to the council's compromise," Ryan continued. "He wanted to give you time to decide freely. But with the Southern packs moving, your safety became paramount." We reached my small apartment above the bookstore on Main Street without incident. While Ryan and another guard, a woman named Tessa, with military posture and vigilant eyes, swept the space for threats, I packed essentials: clothes, books, my laptop, family photos. In my bedroom, I paused at my dresser where a small wooden box held my mother's jewelry. Inside, beneath her wedding ring and a few simple necklaces, lay a leather-bound journal I'd never been able to open, its tiny lock resisting every attempt. On impulse, I added it to my bag. If Omega abilities ran in bloodlines, perhaps my mother had known something. Perhaps she'd left clues I hadn't recognized before. When we returned to the mansion, Mara waited with a stack of books, everything from academic-looking tomes to what appeared to be personal journals. "Your Omega education," she announced proudly. "I've arranged them from basic to advanced. Though some are in older languages, Victor said he'd help translate if needed." I was touching one particularly ancient volume when a commotion downstairs drew our attention. Raised voices, the sound of many footsteps. Ryan tensed immediately. "Stay here," he ordered, disappearing down the corridor. I exchanged worried glances with Mara. "What's happening?" "I'm not sure," she whispered, moving to the door to listen. "Something about trespassers and someone injured?" Before I could stop myself, I was moving toward the stairs, drawn by some instinct I didn't understand. Mara called after me, but I continued downward, following the sounds to a room I hadn't seen before. A medical space with modern equipment incongruously set against stone walls. Dominic stood with his back to me, surrounded by others including Diana and Victor. On an examination table lay a young man, perhaps 20, his face contorted in pain as Victor examined a wound on his side that seeped black fluid. "Southern Crescent poison," Victor was saying grimly, "designed to spread slowly, cause maximum pain." "Can you neutralize it?" Dominic demanded, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I can slow it, but this formulation is new. Without the antidote, which they'll trade for what? Our territory? Our Omega?" Diana spat the words, then noticed me in the doorway. Speaking of whom, all eyes turned to me. Dominic's expression shifted from surprise to concern to calculation in rapid succession. "Eleanor, you shouldn't be here," he said, moving to block my view of the injured wolf. "I felt something was wrong," I admitted. "Who is he?" "Patrick," Dominic answered after a moment. "One of our youngest. He was on patrol when they attacked." The young man moaned, his back arching in pain. Something pulled at me, a sensation like hooks beneath my skin, drawing me forward. "I can help," I heard myself say. "No." Dominic's refusal was immediate. "The poison could affect you too. We don't know how human Omegas react to supernatural toxins." "You said I'm here to learn," I challenged. "To understand what being an Omega means. Let me try." Dominic and Victor exchanged glances. The older wolf nodded slightly. "Limited contact only," Dominic finally agreed. "At the first sign of the poison affecting you, we stop." I approached the table, heart hammering. The wounded wolf, Patrick, looked at me with eyes glazed with pain, pupils dilated until only a thin ring of hazel remained visible. "What do I do?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "Trust your instincts," Victor said quietly. "Your body remembers what your mind doesn't yet know." I placed my hand near Patrick's wound, but not touching the black-tinged flesh. Closing my eyes, I tried to recall the sensation from healing Dominic, the flow of energy, the connection. Nothing happened. "I can't," I began. "You're overthinking." Dominic's voice came from directly behind me, his breath warm against my ear. "Don't try. Feel." His hand covered mine, guiding it to rest lightly on Patrick's uninjured shoulder. The contact sent a jolt through me, not the same electricity I'd felt with Dominic, but a different connection. I gasped as sensations flooded me, burning pain spreading from hip to heart, fear thick as tar, the desperate animal instinct to fight the poison. Acting on pure instinct, I placed my other hand directly over the wound. The moment my palm touched Patrick's poisoned wound, agony shot up my arm, a burning sensation that spread rapidly, making me gasp. But with it came knowledge, intuitive and immediate. I could feel the poison as a foreign energy, dark and malevolent, spreading through his system. "Eleanor!" Dominic's voice seemed distant as I focused on the poison. "I can see it," I whispered. "I can feel where it's going." Instinctively, I knew what to do. Instead of pushing healing energy into Patrick as I had with Dominic, I needed to pull the poison out. I closed my eyes, visualizing the toxic energy reversing its path, drawing back toward the wound, toward my hand. The pain intensified, black lines appearing on my wrist where I touched him. I heard alarmed voices, felt Dominic's hands on my shoulders trying to pull me away, but I held firm. "Not yet," I insisted through gritted teeth. "It's working." And it was. The poison gathered beneath my palm, drawn like iron filings to a magnet. Patrick's breathing eased, his tense body relaxing. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw black fluid pooled on my palm, separate from my skin as if contained in an invisible bowl. "Quick," Victor instructed, holding a metal container beneath my hand. "Release it here." I turned my palm downward, and the poison dropped into the container like viscous oil. Victor sealed it immediately while Diana stared at me with undisguised shock. "Impossible," she murmured. "Extraction is an alpha healer skill, not Omega." I barely registered her words, swaying on my feet as exhaustion crashed over me. Dominic caught me, his arms strong and secure around my waist. "You shouldn't have been able to do that," he said, his voice a mixture of concern and wonder. "It should have poisoned you too." "Special," Patrick whispered from the table, his eyes clearer now. She's special. I tried to respond, but darkness crowded my vision. The last thing I felt was Dominic lifting me into his arms, his heartbeat steady against my cheek as consciousness slipped away. I dreamed of running through moonlit forests, forepaws silent on pine needles, senses alive to every scent and sound. Dominic ran beside me, his wolf form massive and black against the silver landscape. We moved in perfect synchrony, as if sharing one mind, one purpose. The dream shifted. I stood before a circle of stones, ancient and moss-covered. A woman with my face but dressed in clothing centuries old placed her hands on a wounded wolf, drawing darkness from its body, as I had from Patrick. "The gift returns," a voice whispered. "Blood remembers." I woke with a start, finding myself back in my bedroom suite. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, suggesting I'd been unconscious for hours. Dominic sat in a chair beside the bed, watching me with those intense golden eyes. "Welcome back," he said quietly. I pushed myself up against the pillows. "Patrick?" "Fully recovered. What you did?" He shook his head slightly. "It shouldn't have been possible. Poison extraction requires years of training even for born wolves." "Yet I did it instinctively," I murmured, remembering the dream. "Like I'd done it before." "Exactly." Dominic leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Victor has a theory. He believes you're not just any Omega. You're from one of the original bloodlines. The Hayes name doesn't appear in our records, but your maternal line might." My mother's pendant felt warm against my skin. My mother's maiden name was Blackwell. Dominic went very still. "Blackwell," he repeated. "Are you certain?" "Of course." "Why?" He rose, pacing to the window and back. The Blackwell line was thought extinct 3 generations ago. They were renowned healers, the most powerful human Omegas in recorded history, capable of skills most Omegas couldn't master. "Like poison extraction," I guessed. "Among other things." His expression was troubled. "If others learn your true lineage, the danger increases tenfold. The Southern Crescent would stop at nothing to claim you." "But how would they know?" "What you did for Patrick will not remain secret for long. Word travels between packs." He sat on the edge of my bed, closer than before. "Eleanor, I need to ask something significant of you, sooner than I'd planned." My heart quickened. "The bond?" "No," he said firmly. "I promised you time for that decision, and that stands. But I need to announce a formal courtship. Publicly declare my intention to bond with you, with your consent. How is that different from what the Council already knows? A formal declaration invokes ancient protections. It signals to other packs that any move against you is a direct challenge to me and the entire Blackridge pack. It gives you official standing and protection without a completed bond." I studied him, noting the earnestness in his expression. "And the Southern Crescent would respect this declaration? They'd have to consider the consequences more carefully. Open war between major packs is something even they want to avoid." It seemed reasonable, a middle step that bought safety without permanent commitment. Yet something felt missing. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked directly. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "A formal courtship comes with expectations, traditional behaviors, public appearances together. We would need to present a convincing image of compatibility, of growing closeness. You want me to pretend to be falling in love with you." I translated flatly. "I want you to give us both the protection of tradition while you decide if a real bond is possible." His eyes held mine. "I won't lie to you, Eleanor. The courtship may become complicated. Feelings might develop that neither of us anticipates. Because of proximity, because of the healing connection." "Partly," he admitted. "But also because courtship rituals themselves create intimacy. They're designed to reveal compatibility, to foster attachment." I considered his words, weighing options that all seemed equally impossible. "And if, after this courtship, I still choose to walk away, then I will honor that choice," Dominic said without hesitation, "and continue to protect you as best I can, though it will be more difficult without the bond." "And your condition?" "Without a bond, eventually." He nodded once. "Eventually, the deterioration will become irreversible. The Council would be forced to begin succession planning. The implication hung heavy between us. His death, pack instability, increased danger for me. Yet he offered the choice anyway, prioritizing my freedom over his survival. It was unexpected. "I need something from you in return," I said finally. "Name it." "Complete honesty. No more filtered information, no more protecting me from harsh truths. If I'm to navigate this world, I need to understand it fully." Dominic held my gaze. "You have my word. Complete honesty from this moment forward." "Then yes," I decided. Announced the formal courtship. Relief visibly washed over him. "Thank you, Eleanor." "Don't thank me yet," I cautioned. "I haven't agreed to anything permanent. I understand." He hesitated, then reached for my hand. When I didn't pull away, he lifted it, and maintaining eye contact, pressed a gentle kiss to my knuckles. "The first formal gesture of courtship," he explained, "freely offered, freely received." Something fluttered in my chest at the touch of his lips on my skin, a sensation unrelated to Omega energy or supernatural connection. Simple, human attraction, dangerous in its own way. "I should let you rest," Dominic said, releasing my hand and standing. "Tomorrow we begin your formal training, both in Omega abilities and pack customs. The courtship announcement will take place tomorrow evening." After he left, I sat for a long while, turning my mother's pendant between my fingers. Blackwell. A name apparently known and feared in supernatural circles. I thought of the leather journal in my unpacked bag, its tiny lock stubbornly closed all these years. I retrieved it, examining the lock more carefully. The keyhole was shaped unusually, not like a typical diary key, but curved like... On a hunch, I removed my pendant. The curved end of the small silver star fit perfectly into the lock mechanism. With a soft click, the journal opened. Inside, written in my mother's elegant hand, was a history I'd never known, a legacy of Omegas stretching back centuries. Healing rituals, protective measures, and warnings about the power of the bond. My hands trembled as I read her final entry, dated just days before the accident that took her and my father's lives. "Ellie turns 20 soon, still no sign of the gift awakening, which is both relief and sorrow. Perhaps our line truly ends with me. Perhaps she will be spared the burden and beauty of what we are. If the gift does manifest, if you're reading this, my daughter, remember, our power is ours to give, never to be taken. Choose wisely whom you heal, for in their wellness lies your vulnerability. The bond once formed reshapes destiny itself." Tears slid down my cheeks. All these years I'd thought I was alone, orphaned and ordinary. But my mother had known, had been like me, had perhaps hoped to spare me this complicated inheritance. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Diana entered without waiting for permission, her expression cold, but controlled. "The Alpha requests your presence for dinner," she said stiffly. "I'm to help you prepare for your first formal pack meal." I closed the journal, tucking it beneath a pillow. "I can dress myself." "This isn't merely about clothes," Diana replied with barely concealed impatience. "There are protocols, seating arrangements, conversational expectations. Make no mistake, the pack is evaluating you. Some already doubt your commitment to Dominic's well-being." "By some, you mean yourself," I observed. She didn't deny it. "I've served as his beta for 5 years. I've watched his condition worsen while you lived in ignorant bliss. So yes, I question whether you deserve him." Her honesty was refreshing, if painful. "I didn't ask for any of this, Diana. Not my abilities, not your Alpha's interest, not this impossible choice." Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, but perhaps understanding. "Few of us choose our destinies, Omega. What matters is how we face them once revealed." She moved to the closet, selecting a deep blue dress. "This will complement your coloring. I'll return in 30 minutes to escort you downstairs." After she left, I moved to the window, gazing out at the gathering dusk. Somewhere in the forest beyond, enemies gathered. Within these walls, political currents swirled that I barely comprehended, and in my hands rested the fate of a man who grew more intriguing with each encounter. 1 month to decide. 1 month of formal courtship with an alpha werewolf who needed me to survive. 1 month to determine whether freedom alone was worth the price of his life. I touched my knuckles where Dominic's lips had pressed, the sensation still lingering like a promise, or a warning. Whatever came next, I knew with sudden clarity that I would emerge transformed. The question wasn't whether I would change, but who I would become in the crucible of this unexpected destiny. Taking a deep breath, I turned from the window. Dinner awaited. My education began in earnest. And somewhere in this labyrinth of supernatural politics and ancient powers, I would discover not just what I was, but who I chose to be. The Omega. The healer. The human woman who stood at the threshold of 2 worlds. Eleanor Hayes Blackwell, ready at last to claim my inheritance.